This week, Inbar Raz from Zenity is with us to discuss when public payphones become smartphones. In the security news, cross-site scripting is the number one threat. Fix your bugs faster, hacking VoIP systems, AI and how it may help fuzzing, hacker gift guides, new DMA attacks, hacking Intune, Rhode Island gets hacked, OpenWrt supply chain issues, we're being spied on, Germans take down a botnet, Bill and Larry are speaking at ShmooCon, and TP-Link bans. All that and more on this episode of Paul's Security Weekly. This is a Security Weekly production for security professionals by security professionals. Please visit securityweekly.com/subscribe to subscribe to all the shows on our network. It's the show where exploits run wild, packets aren't the only things getting sniffed, and the cocktails flow steady. It's Paul's Security Weekly. If your organization is ready to enhance cyber resilience, we have important insights for you. The Level Blue Futures Report 2024 sheds light on how rapid computing changes affect IT visibility. Research reveals that while IT leaders see positive outcomes, 85% acknowledged increased risk. In this report, Level Blue identifies the barriers to cyber resilience, the challenges impacting cybersecurity, and the business context that reveal operational issues. You'll also discover what's on the horizon and 5 essential steps for prioritizing cyber resilience. Get your complimentary copy of this crucial research today by visiting securityweekly.com/Level Blue. Cybersecurity simplified. Coming to you from Purgatory Studios in semi-high definition, compliments of Darth Vader himself, this is Paul's Security Weekly, episode number 855, being recorded on Wednesday, December 18th, 2024. I'm Paul Asadorian, joined in studio by Mr. Larry Pesce.
Yeah, here we are, a little bit early on our recording schedule.
Yes.
Not that anybody else knows, but...
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Mr. Bill Swearingen is here with us. Bill, welcome.
Hey, thanks, Paul. Just woke up. Happy to be here.
Jerk. Nappy time. Mr. Lee Neely is here with us. Lee,
hey,
welcome.
good
Speaking
to
of
be
nappy
here
time.
and enjoying the nice middle of the day, because that means we could do stuff tonight.
Right. Miss Mandy Logan is here with us. Mandy, welcome.
Why, thank you. And I'm thinking the subject of our awesome interview today is making me nostalgic for standing on street corners, but I mean that only,
What?
not in the way that Bill would, not in the way that Bill or Larry would think of it.
Not like that, Bill. Not like that.
Oh, boy.
Yeah, it makes me think of the old days too, Mandy. You know,
Right.
Bill standing on a street corner.
Yeah.
Quick announcement before we dive into it. If you want to shape the future of identity, Identiverse 2025 is looking for dynamic speakers and would like you to share groundbreaking ideas with over 3,000 identity and access management leaders. Join the most influential voices in IAM and help drive innovation in our industry. Submit your presentation proposal today at securityweekly.com/IDVCFP.
That is Indio Delta Victor Charlie Foxtrot Papa.
I love the way you do that, Larry. It makes me so excited. I'm very excited to welcome Inbar Raz, the VP of Research from Zenity, is with us today. Inbar is a hacker through and through, loves collecting old computers and hacking payphones, but interesting, they have different payphones in Israel. So Inbar, welcome to the show.
Hi. Well, it's 10 p.m. here, so I can.
Nice.
I read the instructions on the email.
Very nice. Very nice.
Not only is he a hacker, but he reads.
Right.
I don't think that's
And follows
sufficient to
the-
get through the show, Inbar.
Oh, he's got the bottle.
Selectively
Okay.
follows
Don't worry.
directions.
Don't worry.
Yeah.
It's all
That's
Oh,
sufficient.
nice. Some bakers, I like it.
yeah.
Inbar, how'd you get your start in information security?
Well, it wasn't called information security back then. It was called being good with computers. Yeah, because I'm turning 50 in June, so I was sent to all these classes when I was in elementary school. My parents kind of tried to push me towards computers. My grandfather, and it was really literally basic stuff. Like I learned basic on, I think it was the ZX48, and I kind of like computer. At age 9, my grandfather bought me my first computer, which was a Dragon 64. It's a UK computer. And I was mostly playing games. I got my first PC at 13, started copying games like everybody else. There's a whole DEF CON talk I did with a friend of mine Eden Shochat, a few years back at DEF CON. And then when I was 14, I went with a good friend of mine to another friend to start copying software. And the guy cracked a game in front of my face. And I was like, okay, I need to learn that. And back at the time, and a lot of it is on the DEF CON talk, we were sort of pioneering hacking in Israel because there was no law that allowed or disallowed things. Everything was very, let's call it retarded compared to the United States a few years back. So we were doing everything from reverse engineering stuff, cracking stuff, hacking into computers. Back then it was all different words, different verbs. Phreaking, which was getting free phone calls. I even built like a phreaker phone, and somehow I just ended up in this field because I think that over time, if you really meant to do that, you become a super curious person. And as a reverse engineer, you just got to know how things work. And once you analyze them well enough, you just start finding the gaps or the problems.
So Inbar, I think probably all of us, who we're all kind of around the same age, but I think all of us have that one moment. So when you're describing that, the thing that stuck out to me was, having someone crack a game right in front of you and just your mind being blown, right? Like, I think we've all had that part in our history with computers, and I have mine too. I know when you said that, I knew exactly what that is for me. Like, I couldn't get my, I was also a very curious teenager taking things apart, and I couldn't get, like you're in DOS and you type win and it's supposed to go into Windows and it wouldn't work for me. So I took my computer into Best Buy, and some guy was like, oh, you have a colon here, it needs to be a semicolon, like in my autoexec.bat in the path, right? And I was like, what? That was so magic, right? Like, I need to know how that works, right? So mine's not quite as hackerish as yours, but I think we all have that moment that put us into that realm of hacking. I just want to know how this works, right? So I think that's super, super cool.
Not per se, because back then computers were really in the geek domain, right? Not to say outcast, but that wasn't really what made you cool to other people. I will say that over time, when you get really into that and you become professional at what you do end up feeling like, hey, that's not that complicated. I don't understand why other people, are struggling with that. And I got to be honest, the whole reason this blog post that we're going to discuss today was written was because I was speaking in Echo Party in Buenos Aires last month, and I met this colleague of mine. She's an Israeli. She just moved to the U.S., and we talked about this project. And she said, "It's cool. I'd like to see photos." And I said, "Sure, I'll send you photos when I get back." And then I got back home and I said, "Well, may as well write a blog post because when I started doing the retro computing, I realized there were no resources in Hebrew. So I decided that my blog would be in Hebrew. So I just wrote a blog post about something that I had done 5 years ago. I did not expect the attention it got. It baffles me. I don't know."
When did you first get started into retro computing? Those watching the video, there's a computer museum actually behind Inbar.
Short answer is COVID. When all the lockdowns started, I was starting to lose my sanity, and I was looking for something to keep me occupied. And by pure coincidence, some friend of mine had gave me an old computer he had and didn't need. So I kind of, meddled with it, and I fixed it. It was a Commodore 128D. And and it's working now. It's in the living room. And then I said, okay, wait, this is cool. So I'm going to limit myself. I'm only going to deal with computers that my friends had. So that was basically 3 more. And then I'm like, yeah, but come on. I mean,
it's only 3 more.
Yeah. And then it's like, oh, but I got to complete the series. I mean, Atari and Commodore. And then I got into fixing them as well, because that's the bigger challenge. I mean, it's nice to have it on display, even if it doesn't work. But the ability to fix that, I mean, looking at it today, it's super low tech. But for me, that's another skill that I didn't have like 4 years ago. The ability
Yeah,
to
so you learned how to repair hardware from this project, right? Did you have a lot of hardware repair experience or hacking experience before that, or?
I had hardware hacking and hardware reverse engineering experience. Some of it from the military, some of it because that's what I do. I like to hack stuff. But then I really want to give a shout out to Adrian from Adrian's Digital Basement, because he's by far the guy from which I've learned the most. There are a bunch of vlogs, but he is the most explaining. He will go down the rabbit hole and take you with him and explain every single step, not just, okay, this is what I did, and here's the refurbished computer. He will teach you. And watching a lot of those videos, I picked up the skill, and I walked a mile until I was any good, because I wasn't in the beginning.
Yeah, because I subscribe to a bunch of channels. A lot of them are on Instagram, and it's kind of just short clips of people who are restoring hardware or repairing laptops. And it's somewhat similar to like the hardware hack. And I watch those because I want to get better at hardware hacking. And I'll see them, looking for the bad capacitors. I watched one. I subscribe to a channel that does audio gear. So he had like this old Techniques, amplifier, and he replaced all the caps on it and cleaned it all up. I'm like, that looks like really rewarding and fun. It sounds like you've been really digging into that aspect of it.
There are other posts on my blog about the other things that I did, but like we can't see it now, but there's a monitor over there. I actually got it 2 days ago. It's a Commodore 1084, and they have a problem where the power switch breaks down and will not stay on. So I got another one like during COVID, and I just fixed the switch, and all of a sudden it was working. And I was like, wow, okay, I'm making progress here. So I think that, because Paul, you mentioned hardware hacking. Hardware hacking is different to this, because hardware hacking will mostly be about understanding how it works and then making it do something that you want it to do, right? Add features, remove features, change the firmware. Here I'm just fixing. I'm trying to get it to work if it doesn't work. So it's like troubleshooting more than anything.
Hardware hacking is like, well, if I fry this, as long as I get the flash chip off of it, I can throw the rest away, right? And you don't care. In fixing stuff, like you do care.
Don't fry this, or it's already fried and I need to fix it.
Right. That's awesome. Yeah. So, Inbar, tell us about payphones in Israel, because it seems to me when you're describing this to me that it's very different from what the systems we had here in the U.S.
Yeah, so the model in the blog, it's not the first one we had. Before that, we had really old ones that used special coins, not currency coins, but payphone coins. I should have one of them somewhere here. But those worked for a while, and of course, so you put them in, and there's a little window where you can see up to 3 coins inside, and every time the phone charges you, one of them will fall down, so you know how many you have left. What we would do, we would tie them to a string, and then when the trapdoor opened, it just didn't fall. That's how we were doing phreaking back then. And then the one that you see in the blog, they call it the telecard. That's how they call the phone card in it. It's not a credit card. And I mentioned in the blog that it was built by the Israeli military industries. So I did some reading when I was into the project. And it wasn't because, or well, maybe it was also because of what you guys mentioned last week, that they probably had the technology, but the spec had to withstand vandalism. So that thing is like a tank. And it's not for nothing that it required lockpicking. There's like no access into it if you don't open that lock.
Well, that's interesting. So they used based on a military specification, replaced the payphones in Israel with ones that I don't want to call it a smart card, but it's a payphone card, right?
It's an optical card, and I learned that because of the reader. The reader says it's an optical reader. It would it's like a punch card more or less, but in the form of a card. And I don't know if it's like military spec. I think people kind of attribute the word military in IMI to military applications, but it's only part of what they do.
Yeah. Well, you say military grade encryption. What does that mean? What does that mean? Right.
And of course, following all the pagers exploding in Lebanon, so the comments on Hackaday were all around that. It's like, there's a backup battery in the IMI manufactured phone.
Well, yeah, I mean, yeah, there is, but Inbar, when did these things go out of service? So like,
they are in the process of coming out of service. This project started because, they had been popping up here and there on like Facebook Marketplace and stuff, but the municipalities have really started taking them off the street roughly around that time, 5-6 years ago. I didn't mention that in the post, but as I was doing the research, I found out a big junkyard where they threw all the ones that they took off the street. And when they took them off the street, it was not with the intention of putting them somewhere else. Some of them were mutilated. Some of them were really in a bad shape. I didn't mind, of course, because I was getting some spare parts and maybe other firmware versions I was hoping. But I have about, I don't know, maybe 10 more in varying degrees of...
Right.
Yeah.
So they were just scrapping them, basically, right? Like I talked about the story before, the telephone booth receptacle that we have here in the studio. I found it at a scrapyard. It doesn't have an actual phone in it, but it weighs a ton. And there's a ton of metal. So someone basically just scrapped it. And then the scrapyard said, well, this is going to be a kind of a cool thing. We'll just resell it. So they got money for the, they paid out for the scrap and they got it back by, selling it to me for a set decoration.
So you can still find them.
Lee's got a question in there.
So I'm not. I apologize if you put this in the blog and I forgot. I was wondering. You said they started pulling them out of service about 5-ish years ago. How long were they in service? Do you have any sense of So they manufactured one. How well it stood up at mil spec type construction?
Well, if you look at the board, then you can look at the cheap manufacturing dates. And I think some of them date in 93. So that's more or less when they made them. I just actually an hour ago, a friend of mine sent me this photo. He found this at some hotel. You can still find them, mostly at specific places like border crossings or hotels or airports,
so
whatever.
What, 12?
But there are very few of them.
But that's still a pretty good lifespan, and it sounded like they weren't all. There was some that were beat up, but they weren't all just trash. They were still reasonably okay. They were
just
like
removed.
They should have. Yeah, that's pretty cool. When you think about a lot of the cheaply made stuff in 2024, I understand mil specifications, but still, that's pretty cool. And you still managed to.
I don't really know if it's mil specification. Really.
Well, I'm just using that as a stereotype, so we're all on the same page. It is
maybe Israeli vandalism specification.
Okay, but it's not your standard consumer grade falls apart in a couple of years, and yet you were still able to pick the lock, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, tell us about this. So this thing normally a lot of times when we find gear like this, the lock is not something they put a lot of thought into, right? It's kind of just there as more of a deterrent, and they're easily picked. I'm thinking of like, the fire, the electronic system that runs the fire suppression and communications for the building. Like I can breathe on it and it pops open, right? But this was not the case when you went to go pick the lock on these phones.
Well, I think the main reason, other than of course vandalism, is that only once you open the box, you get access to the 4 screws that mount the phone on the wall. So if someone opens the box, they can take the phone.
Oh, I see. Okay.
That's the same way that US spec payphones are as well, right? And also to get access to the to the bank where the coins are. So.
Yeah, but you don't have any of those, right? So there's no financial gain here.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
But in all honesty, I only managed to pick the first one. Of course, that was a huge achievement unlock, but with the other ones, I didn't bother. I just drilled them. I drilled 2, and then I found a way to use a very big screwdriver to just force it open.
Well, mention how you got the lockpick set.
Shout out to Gabriel Koelig from one of the booth runners in Def Camp, whom I know for a while, and he runs the lockpicking village every year. He just listened, looked at the photo, and just gave me a box.
That's
So
awesome.
you need these tools because it's not an easy lock to pick.
Not at all. That's not I don't know the technical terms in English for that.
It's
I'm not a
dimple
lock picker.
right?
So it's not a dimple lock. It's well, maybe it is. It's a dimple lock. It's not one of those regular pin locks that you would have in a door, for example. And there are
Right.
two different pins, one inside the other.
Wow.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Oh, pin and pin. I see it
Yeah,
here.
yeah.
Yeah,
And, like, not your starter lock to learn how to lock pick on.
No, I would have given up eventually, but
No, you wouldn't. What happens is you give up to the drill bit, and you're like,
Right.
you know what? I don't need to know how to do this.
I'm,
Like,
in
I'm in.
in
That's
the
what a lot of
immense
people
time
online
we've
are.
loaned you, I'm with Bill. You wouldn't have given up.
no, I would have given up picking, not giving up.
Okay,
on that.
okay.
Yeah.
You would have gone to another plan. You would have hacked it one way or another,
Discs off,
destructive or
whatever.
otherwise.
Nice.
It explains why there's a lot of videos online of people. I think you have one in your blog, right, of people drilling it, pictures of people drilling it because the lock is not easy to pick. Yeah.
But again, another shout out to Lockpicking Lawyer, from which I learned how to deal with this.
Right. That's a great resource.
There are a lot of shout outs here.
That's awesome.
But this is good.
Yeah.
So what was inside?
So as I opened it, it has two halves, like the back half and the forward half. The back half only had the motherboard and basic wiring, like where the handset was and where the phone line was coming in. On the left side, there was everything else, which was the card reader at the bottom. There was a distribution board that was kind of distributing contact or electrical signals. And then you had the keyboard, you had the backup battery, and the LCD screen, which is, I think, 16 by 2, something like that. And then eventually I found out it was a regular off-the-shelf LCD. It wasn't even special.
So how does it read the card? Is it like a barcode scanner?
No, that's a whole mechanical box. It's they're all in storage now. It's a box about this big, and maybe, I don't know, 4 or 5 inches. And you put the card inside, and there's a whole mechanical thing that goes with an optical element that sees how many punches, so to speak, the card has. There's like this little line on top of it, and when it gets punched out, you have no more credits left.
And so that the card reader also punches the credits that have been used as well.
Yes. Now, an interesting thing is, as I said, some of the phones were really broken up. One of them had a really broken up card reader. So I looked inside. That thing alone had another 1806 inside. It was a whole computer just for the card reader, which is not unsimilar to what you had, for example, with the Commodore 64. The drive for the Commodore 64 has a 6502. There's a whole computer right inside the drive.
You know, the funny thing, you mentioned the mechanically punching the card. I'm wondering, was there a hack to like restore the punches to get free credits?
Tipex.
Thought so.
And at some point it stopped working, but it did for a while.
I was going to ask that. So there was people gaming the system, basically hacking it to get around the punch thing.
Of course, nobody in this podcast would ever think of doing that.
Right, Bill?
Right. Yeah. I don't know what Tipex is, but I assume it's tape.
No, it's like this. I don't know. It's the liquid.
Oh, so they just
White liquid. You used to correct.
Okay, so like whiteout
Yes.
or correction
whiteout.
fluid.
Yeah,
Yep.
gotcha.
Okay.
Okay, cool. Very nice. Now, Bill, and I can't see the corner of your screen. Is your payphone still hanging on the wall behind you?
Yeah, so I actually have 2 payphones. This one right here, which gets all the use, so you can see it's, the handset's not even straight. But that one came out of an American prison, so it's only about maybe 2.5 inches thick. But it's made to take the
Take the
the
abuse.
beating. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
Probably same spec.
Yeah. So
Mhm.
so the other one I have is just like what you would find out on the street. And what I found funny about this was the payphone itself cost me $25, US, but it cost me $250 to get it shipped because they're so heavy, right? So, yeah, but
Yeah, I'm glad I found both of mine locally.
yeah, I wish I would have.
It wasn't quote $25. It was like probably $75 a piece. But
I don't know. I
Yeah.
think
Yeah.
Inbar wins. He doesn't just found local. He found like the mother load of them.
Yeah, no doubt.
So following the blog post, one of the local researchers wrote to her friend. She said, I was really looking into researching that, but I'm missing some parts. So I just sent a message to reach out because I have spares. So maybe we'll have another version of the research.
So, Inbar, was there people that had taken these phones apart prior to you doing this research?
I don't know. None of them had stepped forward and said so.
Right.
But it's kind of, I think that if to go back to the conversation we had at the beginning of becoming a hacker and having that curiosity, I think that if you don't have that sort of specific curiosity, there's really nothing interesting in a payphone. I would take apart, cool stuff, but a payphone, what's in a payphone? And I didn't even know, but I needed to find out.
And Inbar, I think part of the thing that I think one from your blog post was like the part that really made you curious about it was the remote diagnostics.
Yes.
Like, yeah,
I was going to ask if there was back end, what the back end communications were.
Take apart all sorts of cool stuff, but why does it have a computer? Because it can tell the phone company, it can tell the provider that there's something wrong with the phone. How do you do that?
So that's the objective I had with reverse engineering the software. I didn't get that far, although based on all the attention that this has been getting, there's no other way but to go back to that. I was hoping to find the protocol, and of course I was hoping to find a vulnerability and do some stuff with it, but I never got that far. One of the open research questions, for example, is, does the phone actually phone home, or is that some other signaling over the phone line? And I haven't found a phone number embedded in the software, but maybe it's encrypted in a part I haven't gotten to yet. It's on my GitHub, so if anybody wants to give it a shot.
So you were able to get to the flash chips and pull some of the firmware off of it?
Yeah, there was no protection, of course. This is from '93, and no one was thinking about that. I got the firmware. I looked at it. I have some screenshots. You can see a lot of strings that are indicative of what you're looking for, and even the names of the authors, which, by the way, one of them we managed to find on LinkedIn. He lives in the US now. So I might, interview him at some point, try to get some information from him.
Very cool.
And then in order to actually understand what's going on, I had to find a disassembler. And it had to be an interactive disassembler because working with a text file is not something you do for the last 30 years, I think. And none of the existing big tools, which are IDA or IDA Pro or Ghidra, which had come out about a couple of years before that, supported that CPU because it's really esoteric. It's not very common. And retrospectively, for a good reason, it's really unusual in its structure and operation. So I found some regular disassemblers, but of course that wasn't going to do. And then I figured if I really want to find out what's going on, somebody, me, would have to write the CPU module for one of those tools. And it was just easier with Ghidra. And Ghidra is free. So.
How long did it take you to write that out of curiosity?
Ages. Yeah. That was at least a couple of months, at least. I mean, understanding the language and writing that, and then of course, it wasn't always working. And sometimes you realize that right off the bat, but sometimes you will spend another 3 hours reverse engineering, and then some opcode wouldn't make sense, and then you would realize that, okay, that was wrong, and then you have to go back and do it again.
Yeah, what is that process? I mean, so like I know you just kind of went through it, but how do you even start? With developing that CPU for your debugger, right?
So like any other project, you first look for documentation, and then you look for other examples. And because Ghidra is open source, then I had full access to the definition of the existing CPUs. So it was relatively easy to get the gist of it. The real problem was what you're doing in Ghidra. You describe what each opcode does with their internal language. So once you learn that internal language, it's like, okay, describing what the opcode does, but this CPU is really unusual. And some things were really hard to implement.
Does that mean you were able to get documentation with all the opcodes for the CPUs, or did you have to?
Yeah, okay. Easy. It's most of them.
93, is it even available anywhere? You know what I mean? Because of time.
I think it's still officially on the website of the manufacturer, but the Internet Archive would have that. So,
of course.
Apparently, it was quite common for certain applications. People were really fond of it at the time.
Ooh, nice.
Even I think the editor at Hackaday wrote that he used to work with that, so he had some affection to it.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think people don't appreciate how long and arduous this task is, right? I mean, like kind of riffing on what Bill was asking is, it's, you read the post, like, and I can go, and I encourage everyone to go read the post. Like, oh, like that's cool. Like I consumed that post in 10 minutes, but it represents years of on and off work, right?
I would say about 8 or 9 months.
That's honestly part of why I was really drawn to it, was thinking about the amount of time and dedication. And I don't know, this might be silly, but I was actually extremely happy that you were safe enough, chill enough, had the resources and availability to have done all of this consistently.
Well, it's over time. You kind of make it a side project, and you work in it when you have time or when you make time. And I do have to admit that the challenge of writing the CPU definition and getting it to work well, that was really a challenge that I took personally. Like, I was going to get very offended if I didn't succeed. So that was a good driver.
It looked like you were even at the beach doing some work on that.
Yeah, I was at Kaspersky when there were still the good guys. They had a conference in Cancun, and I went there, and I was in the middle of the work. So I just sat by the pool, and I was working on the CPU definition.
The project is personal when?
Did you have background in microcode or opcode development or anything, or just you just like dove in?
Not microcode. I am a reverse engineer since I was 14, with a wide range of architectures, but not this sort of CPU. And but unless it's something really, really weird like a DSP, most CPUs, whether CISC or RISC, are more or less the same. You got to learn the names of the registers and how basic operations work, and from there on, it's just using the reference. The challenge was creating the CPU definition, because I knew that once I got Ghidra to properly disassemble it, I could read through that without a problem, because that's a skill I already have. But I needed to have the disassembly.
I was asking because in college, one of my last senior projects was creating a 4-bit CPU, including, determining the opcode and then dumping the microcode into an EEPROM and stuff, which was really cool. And you got me some pleasant flashbacks thinking about that.
There's a famous project from NAND to CPU, right, where you do that over the course of a whole semester. You learn about the NAND and the NAND gate, and then you build the flip-flops and the transistors and everything, and you end up building a computer.
Where I live, buddy. That was some good times. Mind you, it was like 40 years ago. But yeah, awesome.
Nice, cool stuff.
You know what that means, Lee?
I'm old.
Yes.
So,
Hey, but I had a
Inbar,
great path getting here. So
Was
Oh,
this
me too.
a real-time operating system, or did it have the concept of a kernel, or was it more of a microcode, like just code running right on the CPU?
It was code running on the CPU.
Gotcha. Okay.
So the guy that wrote it said that initially they had written it all in assembly language,
Mm-hmm.
and then at some later point during the project, some of it was converted to C language. So they did have some sort of a compiler, but there's no operating system. They wrote the whole thing on bare metal.
That's awesome. Yep.
It's awesome as an engineering feat, but when you're a reverse engineer, it sucks.
Right. Yeah, every line of code is something to investigate, basically, right?
Because the benefit of having a known environment is that you can relatively easily rule out code you don't need to reverse because it's already known.
Right.
But there was nothing known here at all.
Wow.
Yeah, this is why eventually I didn't finish the project. I mean, other than life and COVID taking over, the progress was relatively slow.
Mm. Yeah. Did you have any significant findings from like once you finally got to reverse engineer it, or?
Some, yeah. First of all, when you reverse engineer embedded devices, you always look for the interfaces. And here we had a screen, which was perfect because screens have strings sent to them. So if you start with the strings and then look for offsets to the strings and opcodes that refer to these offsets, you will find the code that sends strings to the screen. And then I did that. It was very useful at a later stage. Some strings were in Hebrew, so I had to do the re-encoding. Mandy, you asked about English. Israel is very tourist friendly. All the street signs, all the highway signs are in Hebrew, English, and Arabic. So having English on a public payphone is nothing out of the ordinary.
Well, that makes sense, but I really appreciated from your blog post thinking about the extra step you had to take because the strings, you did not have what you needed in Hebrew. And
to know what it does.
Yeah, I think that, I'm curious, like how often do you run into that? Is that a commonplace thing still in everything you're reverse engineering or not?
Well, not since Unicode, but what will happen now is that every now and then when I look at old stuff, I will find code from the late 80s or early 90s when we still had code pages, and there were various ways to encode the various languages. So there were like 3 or 4 different encodings just for Hebrew. So it could be the ISO or it could be something else. And then if I look at my old documents, which I have backed up somewhere, some of them just don't open unless I force an encoding. I think Hebrew was code page 862 or something like that.
That fascinates me. And then I also, with using Gidro, because it hadn't been released very long when you were doing this project, right?
Not long. Well, I don't really remember when it came out. It was a big deal for everybody.
Yeah.
Because IDA Pro had been raising their prices.
Yeah, I've heard complaints about the IDA Pro and not just increasing prices, but changing their licensing models as well.
This just happened recently, and if you guys are listening to the Free Body Problem podcast, then Juan Andres talked a lot about that. Yeah.
Yes, that's exactly where I got that from. Love that podcast, by the way. I think they're doing a great job.
3 very dear people. Another shout out.
Yeah.
All 3 of those, by the way, I know from the Kaspersky events.
Right. Yeah, they've talked about going to the Kaspersky.
They all worked there. Yeah. Ryan was organizing the conference.
Yeah, I've met Ryan before, but I haven't met Juan or Costin. Is that how you say his name?
Costin. In Romanian, it's Costin, but in English, it's Costin.
Costin. Yes, right. Yeah, I feel like I know him because I've been listening to the show. Because he changed from security conversations to the 3 buddy problem.
Yeah, I really like these guys.
I'm digging it. What was I going to ask? But there's also other commercial reversing software. I know some people are very fond of Binary Ninja as well, but that's also commercial software. But I think people like the licensing model better for Binary Ninja than IDA.
Yeah, and there's also Radare, but that's
Yeah,
hardcore.
yeah.
I think
yeah,
there's not really a UI, and it's really if you're a command line guy and you like the terminal screen, that's for you.
Right.
But it's very good for scripting, as far as I can gather. But so Ghidra was the right tool for the job, and it did the job very well. I didn't actually use any decompilation; it was all disassembly, and I read the code myself. Part of it because Ghidra or IDA Pro or any other disassembler can't handle some of the characteristics of this CPU. I mentioned it in the blog. Calling conventions, which dictate how you pass parameters to function, usually say you push the arguments on the stack. The order depends on the language. It's one way if it's C, and it's the other way if it's Pascal. But this CPU, if you have variables, you will put them on the stack or registers. But if you have an immediate value, it will be following the opcode of the call to the routine. And there's like no easy way to let the routine know what the argument was. And it's also up to the routine to modify the return address. And it was really weird. Wow. And another weird thing with the CPU is that any one of the general purpose registers can be designated to be the instruction pointer at any given minute. So that is also very confusing.
Right. That's crazy.
So I was struggling with that.
When you were looking at the commands being sent to the text being sent to the screen, were you able to uncover like any hidden menus or debug menus as part of that? Or is that something in the back of your mind?
I don't know if I saw debug menus. I did see many strings that I had never seen in my real life experience. That is why at some point I wanted to run the phone. And mind you, I actually do have a landline here for historical reasons. I'm just keeping that. And that didn't work. Something was not working well. So I said, okay, let's take the battery out and just inject 12 volts into the battery connection. And the phone booted, but something didn't work. It gave an error message, something in the, I think, startup checks that it's doing. And I really wanted to get to a point where I could dial a number because I do have a line. And that started another phase of the research to try to understand what the problem was. Maybe it was looking for special signaling on the line. Maybe the battery voltage was, so I didn't know. And the routine that writes the error message, it's one place, but there were like 14 different places that branched into that error routine. And I had to know which one it was in order to try to investigate the problem that I was experiencing. And I was struggling with that. And at first I thought, okay, I have an 8-channel logic analyzer. If I can record the lower 8 bits of the address bus, then maybe I can, look back and say, okay, here's the fetch of memory instructions, and then go back. But that didn't work well enough, or didn't work well at all. I don't actually remember. But then I had the idea. I said, wait, I control the code, and I already know how to send strings to the screen. I know which routine to call. So I did a small test where I just added some code that sent something to the screen, and that worked. And then I had a plan. I said, okay, I'm going to patch the program, just set hooks like you would do with a Windows driver or whatever. I placed 14 hooks at the 14 places that branched into the routine. The hook led to a routine that was saving the address it came from and then sending it out to the screen. And then I got the address 4930, and indeed that was where the check was failing. And I didn't find out what it was failing over yet, because there was a lot of external, peripheral interface action. And I didn't get that far, but I did manage to execute my own code on top of the existing code using existing routine. So basically,
Trying
just
to basically build your own
patching.
debugger that sends output to the screen
Yeah,
on the device.
I would have gotten to that, or I might still get to that if I go back to the project. Yeah.
So I know the phone losers back in the 90s had done a lot of research about what it took to register a payphone in your house, and so I don't remember the technical details, but there was a specific change that had to occur, at least in the U.S., that the telco had to make to be able to register this phone as a payphone. So in the U.S. there were two different types of payphones. They were a telco owned a payphone that was what was required, and then what was considered a COCOT, which was essentially a customer owned payphone that could attach to just a normal landline. And so I wonder if that's probably what you're dealing with, is that there was that it's expecting a specific signal, maybe a different voltage, right? Like that would register it, to get it past that spot. But so I obviously, the payphone experience I have is not, they're it's U.S. based, but that might be an interesting place to start, right? At least seeing how the U.S. spec payphones were to register. What an interesting, neat challenge, right? Like that.
It makes super sense, especially because there are only two ways by which the phone can, phone home, right? Either actually dial a number or through signaling. And if it's through signaling, it has to be a specific line routed through a specific trunk ending in a specific device. And maybe my phone didn't find that device. Maybe that's the error. I don't know.
Yeah, but now if you can control the code, you can spoof it.
Yeah, exactly. So that's
Right.
that's probably the next step.
Jump, not zero.
Right.
Just jump over that function.
Well, I'm curious where you want the project to go. So I read the post and I read the end. And that I like, I'm not picking on you. The end was weak because like I've been there myself, knowing like I'm not picking on you, but I know that
feel free.
More.
It's okay.
Yeah, I know that there's more. Where do you want to take it?
So there are two options. First is to complete the research and actually figure out what's going on and get this phone to work. And the second thing is, I've been collecting old regular phones. These are like landlines, but they're not sophisticated in any way. It's just a regular phone with no screens, just a regular pad. And the initial thought was, I'll start by putting this inside and getting it to work, right? And once that happens, I want to utilize the screen. And that's the last part of the blog post, where I was playing with the Arduino to make sure that I know how to write to the screen myself. And I already bought had it printed, the PCB, and bought the parts for this little device that does the caller ID thing for the Arduino. So I was figuring, at the very least, even if I can't have the display show you the number you're calling, it can show you the number that's calling you. And then the most advanced idea I've had, which is another reason why I actually have 10 more here, is that I had an idea where I refurbish it with a completely new setup inside, and then I can sell it, let's say, to startup companies, and maybe it has their logo or something, or I don't know what.
Something can put in their lobby and have it.
Yeah. Anything to free up the storage space here, because really, it's been 5 years, and those phones are big.
We all know that pain. Everybody here knows that pain for sure.
Yep. Yeah, you can only see a small portion of the studio. Not all of Paul and Larry's storage.
Yep. It's like, and I will, the storage is some of the problem. We actually just cleaned out a whole bunch of our storage recently, and like I have two payphones at home, and they both work. You can hang them on the wall, and they make phone calls. with some of the hackery. You don't need to put coins in them anymore. It's already squared away for that. And we literally have one hanging in our kitchen where the old school kitchen wall phone used to be. And it rings. It's the only phone in the house that actually still rings when they call the landline, because yes, we have a landline for very similar reasons why Inbar probably does. Yep, because reasons. But the other one for many years actually sat on a little stand in our bathroom on the first floor. But now it's actually like, quote, set decoration behind some of the stuff in my office, because we needed space for actual stuff in the bathroom.
Right.
But it's still pretty. I mean, even if I can't get all of those to run again, they're pretty. I like them.
So, I'm curious, you mentioned earlier, this was 8 to 9 months of tedious work, learning, like banging your head against the wall until you get it to move. What drove you? Was it the learning, or was it nostalgia for payphones? Like what was that driving force that kept you just pushing on that?
I need to know. I have no nostalgia for payphones. I could care less. I wanted to know if I could hack the back office. I'm not saying I would have done it. I wanted to know whether it was possible.
That's awesome.
It's awesome.
Yeah,
because that would make a great DEF CON talk, right?
Oh my gosh, incredibly. Yeah. Like, especially, not knowing a whole lot, you mentioned that they're going through and they're systematically removing those. I wonder if the back office connections still exist, right? Like, I wonder if that connectivity still exists, and, and quite honestly, can you get to it from your house, right? Like, does it
not from my house, but if it's not from my house, then naturally I would either take this phone or find a way to implement that and look for some phone. Let me not incriminate myself.
Yeah, the next post is going to be you in a hoodie, like, and it's going to be dark, and you're like screwing wires into the back of that thing.
Yeah,
like,
I'm taking the fifth here. Yeah,
alligator clips. Another one I think that would be fantastic in Bar would be if you could get like a couple of those phones working and figuring all the signaling, and putting them on a network somewhere, like with like one of the open source asterisks type PBXs.
Why do I need that? I have 2 PBXs right here, like real. Right. Because what I intend to do with at least one of them is to rebuild the BBS.
That's amazing.
You're a man after my own heart,
right?
So I was after my own heart. Going with my buddy Eden, with which I gave the DEF CON talk. So he has a kid who's 17 now, and we wanted to, let him see what we did when we were his age. So I got 2, I think it was like Pentium 3s or something that I had lying around here, and I serial modems from my collection, like US Robotics serial modems, and I brought the PBX, and I brought 2 of those phones that I've just shown you. And we installed and set up a BBS just for fun. And then we scrapped the whole thing. But we went through the motion of configuring remote access and front door and building a BBS, just having it answer and phoning from one computer to the other through the PBX. It was really cool.
Sounds like so much fun.
It does.
I ran a Wildcat BBS for so long.
There you go.
Yeah, loved it, man. That's nostalgic for me, right?
So Wildcat, Opus, front door, yeah. Those were the days.
Yep, those were the days.
Yep, we had a friend that I was going to say he was rich, but he was not rich. Paid for licenses for major BBS.
Yep.
And had 3 lines. So like that was expensive in the 90s. Like that was $1,500 or something like that for 3 lines. That's what he spent his money on. Like literally spent his money on. Like he ate ramen noodles and didn't have gas for his car.
Hey, I eat ramen noodles and I don't have gas for my car.
And I spent my dad's money. So yeah.
There you go.
Oh, that's awesome.
So Inbar, we just have 5 questions left. You ready to play 5 questions with Security Weekly?
I have no idea what it is, but I'm adventurous and I just finished this, so let's go.
Yeah, nice. 3 words to describe yourself.
Hacker of things.
If you were a serial killer, what would be your weapon of choice?
Binary poison.
If you wrote a book about yourself, what would the title be?
Wow. Maybe I need to know. I don't know.
Huh?
What is your favorite hacker movie?
War games.
Yes.
We all have our favorites, so we all cheer for our favorites.
Look, I think people choose hackers because they get starstruck by Angelina Jolie. But if you factor her out, that movie has little to do with reality, especially compared to war games. That's my personal take. No offense meant here.
No offense taken.
Everyone's entitled to their opinion. Okay.
Yeah.
Choose 2 celebrities to be your parents.
Alive, dead, fictional, or otherwise.
I'll let you have that one this week.
I think these groups are mutually exclusive. Maybe. Well, if I had known the questions beforehand, I would have thought about that.
That's kind of the point, though.
Right.
And there are no wrong answers here.
Yes. Celebrities.
And celebrities is a relative term, right? Like, they could be a celebrity in your own mind.
One has to be super rich and the other one has to be super cool, I think. That balances it. So Steve Jobs. No, Steve Jobs. Well, Steve Jobs is not a good father. We know that.
But he's super rich.
Super
Or
rich.
He was super rich.
Okay, so he can go for the super rich. And then I'm tempted to say Robin Williams.
Ooh.
Nice.
Yeah. Yeah.
He's very empathetic, I think. Or was.
And I'd probably laugh so hard I cried all the time.
I know,
So
right?
that'd be awesome.
Well, Inbar, thank you so much for appeing on Paul Security Weekly. It was
Thank you
wonderful
guys for
having you on the
inviting
show.
me. I did not expect that. Thank you so much.
Yeah, this was awesome, man. I love your shirt, man. That's cool.
Me too.
Yeah.
Nice.
Thank you.
I love it.
Gremlin.
Yeah.
For those listening, Gremlins. If you don't know that movie, you should go watch it.
Yes.
It is not a Christmas movie, unlike that one. But with that, we will take a short break and come back with the security news. Stay tuned.